Thanks
very much,
Hanabeth.
Catherine, and thanks everyone for attending today. It's great to see so many faces here in Wagga Wagga. I'm just going to first just introduce our panel here. I'm based at Southern Cross University. I'm a senior lecturer in science and agriculture. And we also have here on the panel, we have Linda Wirf. So she's close to completing her Soil CRC PhD with Charles Sturt University. And she's looking at how women's knowledges can influence change in Australian farming systems and practices. She lives in the Northern Rivers of Australia, and New South Wales, Australia, that is, and is in the process of revegetating her horse paddock around her house, and has took a strong leadership role in setting up the Lismore Community Garden. Jay Cummins is passionate about supporting farmers in the adoption of sustainable farming systems. Jay spends his time split between managing projects with Mallee Sustainable Farming and undertaking international agricultural development projects across South Asia. Jay's research interests include farmer adoption of innovation, empowerment of youth and women in agriculture, and the development of conservation agriculture systems capable of enhancing food and water security outcomes. He also has a PhD in farmer adoption and technology. Diana Fear is a rural leader with 15 years' experience in the rural sector, and that includes 6 years as CEO of Central West Farming Systems, also complemented by board and committee experience. She's an advocate for rural women with targeted projects and conferences to advance economic and social outcomes for this demographic. And she's, as she discussed earlier, she's leading the Women in Youth project. She also lives on a mixed cattle farm with cropping and irrigation near Condobolin in the central west of New South Wales with her third generation farmer husband Cole. Kelly Angel works at BCG. She's been there for 13 years, and her role is the Senior Research and Extension Officer, which has a long history in agronomy as well. She works on devising and managing field trials and developing strong industry relationships. She's very passionate about finding out the best approaches for growers managing the various agricultural challenges we face. So, jumping into the session, we've got, from the social benchmarking studies across Australia, we can see very clearly that farming across Australia is not homogenous. Each farming system's got very different social attributes. In some areas, such as Tasmania, a quarter of farmers there are women. In other areas, such as the Northern Wheat Belt in WA, it's just 8%. On the Northern Wheat Belt, we've got an average age or median age of 70 for farmers, whereas we're looking at more like 57 on the Eyre Peninsula. So, part of the culture in agriculture means we have a certain way of doing things within our rural societies. And as Frank Van Clee wrote about in 2004, farming is a social cultural activity, and so is knowledge sharing. So I want to ask the question, is our agriculture allowing these different voices to be heard? Okay, so Linda, I would love to hear from you about, what are the consequences of not hearing or sharing diverse voices in agriculture?
Yeah, well, thanks, Hanabeth. I can kick off with just giving some background from a research perspective based on the PhD study that I've been doing over the last 4 years in central west New South Wales and the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia. So, I guess really the first question is, why does including women's knowledges in agriculture, knowledge sharing, actually matter? Well, my study found that men have agricultural knowledge that is incredibly valuable, but women's knowledges can bring new perspectives and approaches that can help make farming more resilient and sustainable into the future. So the women in the study often expressed a wider ecological approach, as one of the women described it, listening to nature and working within it. So it appears that women's knowledges are important, but I found that women are not being included that well in agriculture knowledge sharing currently. The women in my study told me that they face a lot of barriers when it comes to being part of knowledge sharing activities. So one of the key barriers is the perception that farmers are men and that knowledge sharing events are mainly for men, so that women lack the confidence to get involved or to speak up if they actually do go to something. As one of the men in the study said, I feel so sorry for the one girl there with the 12 blokes. It's usually that ratio, and sometimes even worse. And another man said that he'd gone to a field day with 70 men and not one single woman. So women also said that lack of facilities for women and children, like toilets or places to breastfeed, just basic things like that, can actually make it really difficult for them to attend things. And sometimes the timing of events just conflicts with women's other commitments, like, school drop-offs and pick-ups and things like that. So they're just some of the barriers. But as part of my study, I also looked at images on over 30 agricultural organisation websites in Australia. And I found that the photos of knowledge-sharing events really reinforced the message that those events were for men. So most of the images were of all men, and occasionally a very large group of men with one or two women standing off to the side somewhere. So I guess it's a self-perpetuating cycle, really. The more that women get the impression that knowledge sharing is for men, the less likely they are to get involved, and then the opportunities for change and innovation that women's knowledges could bring are being missed. So I'm really interested to hear the experiences of the other panellists who are working on the ground with these issues rather than a research perspective.
Thank you very much, Linda. It's so interesting, the importance of that role modelling. I know my daughter loves to see, she sees a strong female character and she goes, I'm her. It can be really important having those images of women in those roles. So I'm really interested to hear from you, Jay. So where do we sit in terms of globally? Where are we in Australia? Are we ahead of the curve in terms of inclusivity in ag, or are we? Where are we right now?
Oh, firstly, I feel as if I'm in confession at the moment. But seriously, I started my career working as a local agronomist, and then sort of did quite a bit of work internationally prior to COVID, and sort of coming back into the fold with Mallee Sustainable Farming, the farming systems groups, is a bit like sort of stepping back in time in terms of the lack of opportunity and empowerment for both farming women and youth as well. And certainly at the federal government level, from DFAT, ACR, that there's a strong sort of ethos there to really look at opportunities for empowering women and youth in many of the research and capacity building projects. And just to see that the benefits within those developing countries and the local communities, the net economic gain, and also the pride and the enhancement in capacity of farming women is really sort of outstanding. And I think that from my own perspective, the policymakers within Australia need to really have a close look at themselves and look at the lead that's happening with a lot of the supported programs internationally as well.
Thanks very much, Jay. I'm really keen to hear now from Diana and Kelly. So what kind of challenges might you see, while we're still sort of looking at the challenges here, how does it play out in your regions? Is it something you're seeing?
In our region, I've noticed is that there's still a very much a patrilineal pattern of land inheritance. So really, there's sort of, it goes to who owns the land, they make the decision. So the fact that a lot of women marry into family farms, they just don't have that decision-making ability. And even people I know that have married, they've grown up on the farm next door and they've married the next door neighbour, they still don't get to make those decisions on that farm with their husband. So there's a kind of that sort of attitude still exists. The other side of it is too, there's the practical, there's the biology side. So, and services. So we don't have, you live on a farm a long way from town, you don't have any service to look after the kids, there's no child minding. So primary caregivers usually generally be the mothers while their husbands are out on the farm. So that again restricts women's access to farming knowledge and decisions, and isolates them as well, which then, and a lot of women that do marry into family farms are very, have had great careers, but that's often limited, and then they lose confidence. So I see confidence as a real problem.
That's interesting, and also that you've linked it in with that service infrastructure as well. That certainly comes up as in the top 5 in the social benchmarking studies as issues across regions. And Kelly, how about you? How's things in
Yeah,
Western
I guess we're a bit similar to you know, the work that Linda's done and what Jay has said is what we see play out often at events and activities that we have on. We see that, you know, you get your feedback forms back from the demographics of the people in the room, and the young and the female are the ones that are often not represented as strongly. So, you know, you're looking at 40 to 60-year-old men who are probably, you know, got sons on the farm, but they're still the key representative showing up at these events and making those decisions. So we've really tried to work hard to try and change that demographic.
Great, thanks, Kelly. And I mean, but what are the roles that you're seeing women undertaking in farming today? What are women doing on farms in your regions?
I think the important thing to remember too is we can look at what we do with our events, but we have had instances where farmers, so the male counterparts of a farm business, will stand up and say, hang on, you've just taken a photo of me and my sons, but my wife or my son's partner or whatever, they're sitting in the background, they're doing a fair bit of work as well. They might not be driving a tractor or getting the crop in or getting the crop off, but they're preparing the meals for the work team, they're running the books, they're helping out with the grain marketing and all those sorts of things. So I think one of the challenges for us is to make sure we don't capture one side of the story, but we look at the full farm business.
Absolutely. So,
Hanabeth, can I just add, that's
please.
huge in our area too, like the under-acknowledgement of what women actually do and how they add value, and the farm really couldn't run without them. So that's a huge issue.
Yeah, I found in my research too that a lot of the times women are doing a lot, but both them and their male partner describe it as helping. They don't see it as really farming. They're just helping on the farm, when often they're contributing substantially.
thanks for that insight as well, Linda. So look, how can we improve the situation? You know, Jay, I mean, is it enough for us to wait for things to get better in Australia, or what else can we do?
Oh, I think there's initiatives through the group networks. For example, if you really look at the group dynamics when you're presenting to farmers or having a workshop or discussions, for a lot of the younger farmers, for example, you can really see they're left out of the conversation in that the level at which the messages are pitched at can be sort of quite complex, and that they may not necessarily have a formal agricultural qualification, but there's a real need to look at how we can better segment the audience and really sort of cater to those that haven't got the same level of knowledge as some of the more experienced farmers to help support them in the pathway. And as has been said, it's about building the confidence and their interest in participating more openly.
And Jay, how have you seen that done well internationally?
Certainly that there's been the focus of really addressing some of those social barriers, and there's been some good examples. For example, just a recalling of some of the survey work I've sort of carried out in Nepal, for example, where they've sort of linked into other self-help groups where they've, there's been other programs looking at, sort of household finance initiatives, and there's been some really good transferable skills that have been utilised and taken over to the agricultural sector. So it's about looking at all the skills within the communities and what skills are transferable, and certainly within communities in Australian work that I've looked at reviewing farming systems groups. Any sort of capacity building benefits everyone within that community, whether they're leading the local play group or school council or the local volunteers, CFS volunteers.
Great, thanks, Jay. And I sort of said, do we sit and wait? I know that's not happening. I know there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of really good work in this space. Diana, I know you're one of those. Do you want to talk a bit about the approaches and that you've been using to engage women farmers
Hanabeth.
and younger farmers in your region?
Yep. So we've got a women and youth project, so we're trying to encourage both of that demographics to be involved. But for women particularly, we have a lot of women-only workshops, and we just find that they're very much more, they're less nervous about asking questions, and at the end of the day, we actually have a lot of fun, which is really good as well. And you see that you're creating a really cohesive social network, and these women can actually support each other, continuing from any projects that we're doing. and we had an ag marketing project which was looking at building practical skills in the value chain of selling your commodity. And so we had processors, we had grain marketers, we had experts in different varieties of crops. So, and that was really fantastic because we really upskilled, and because women often are at home working in the office, they have that ability to be looking at the markets and especially at harvest time or prior, how busy it is on the farm. And, you know, a lot of the husbands would see me in the street and come up and say, you know, that was a fantastic project, you know. My wife knows what she's talking about for once. But it was good. So we have to put into action, you know, because often until the guys, you know, sitting there see it and hear it, they kind of take it a bit for granted that you don't know what you're talking about.
And Kelly, I know you've also been busy.
Yeah, so we've had some projects with a project was called GAP, which stood for Growth, Adoption, Production and Profit. And within that, we had a women's group set up so that they could learn the skills and the areas of knowledge that they wanted to support their family farm business. One thing that we did notice from it, so it was great, really good engagement. It was the largest group that we actually had as part of the project, and the most consistently attended in terms of the same sort of group coming together, which maybe speaks to women and liking to gather and that sort of thing. But one thing we did notice at the end of it, and I hadn't mentioned this to you previously, Hanabeth, is we still need to be really careful not to completely segregate based on stereotypes, because we actually do have a couple of female farmers in our area, and they found being thrown into the Women's Gap group undermined the things that they were trying to do on their farm. They weren't getting that same level of discussion with other farmers that they wanted. So you probably need to understand who your audience is and what it is that they're wanting and where they're going to be most comfortable to obtain that information, and then develop groups around that.
Great, thanks. And Linda, is there anything else that you noticed in through the literature that sort of inspired you around what's happening in women's initiatives?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important what Kelly just said actually about not completely segregating, and I think maybe it's about building up women's confidence in the ways that Diana talked about, but then being really important that then that comes back into the mainstream kind of knowledge sharing practice, so that, women's knowledge could be just sitting over there and they're just kind of, doing their thing, but it's really important that there's a collaborative approach, I guess, and that women's knowledge gets brought back into mainstream at some point.
Why? What's the benefits of including women's voices more in farming? I'd love to hear from. I might ask Kelly that one, and then back over. A women's knowledge is different.
I think the values and the skills they bring are different. The way they look at things is quite different, and they bring. So you've got your male counterpart, and I don't want to stereotype. So if you don't fit, that's okay. You don't have to fit, but the males will bring the strength, the logical thinking, the rapid decision making, the acting without dwelling on it quite as much, get the job done, move on to the next job, where the woman will bring the empathy, the understanding, the sympathetic side to the story, what if I do this, what does it mean for the rest of the picture? And they actually complement each other very well. So to get farming communities to understand the different parts that each brings to the table, to the picture, is really important to get the best outcomes long term for these sorts of things.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Did you want to add anything, Diana?
No, look, I absolutely concur with Kelly, and yes, you always have to be careful about generalising and stereotyping, but I think too that it's interesting that from what I see, the women that I deal with, there's kind of a more community holistic approach. So that's a really an advantage to that, kind of looking at how everything fits together. Whereas some of the male guys who can be, as we all know, farmers are time poor and very stressed, and so they don't have that ability to be potentially a little bit more creative or innovative. And also we have some amazing women farmers too. So yeah, that's.
Jay, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to say that there also needs to be a bit of a attitudinal shift amongst the blokes as well. And once again, we're underestimating the full intellectual capabilities. And I sort of think back to a few years ago, driving along in the car with the wife, and the wife suddenly says, "Oh, gee, look at all that rhizoctonia in that paddock." So, yeah, let's build the capacity and the confidence.
That's an important point. There's some very well-educated, knowledgeable men and women in the community. A lot of, like the business I work in, BCG, we've got 26 staff on the books. 2/3 of them are female. A lot of them come in as graduates out of university. They get picked off by local farmers who are looking for a wife. So suddenly you've got these well-educated women who actually know what agriculture is and what it means, and they're part of our networks as well. So, no stereotypes allowed, because they all bring value in some level.
Great, thank you. And back to you, Linda. So in terms of some of the outcomes of your PhD, what do you think some of the most important ways forward are, and what are the benefits in bringing those knowledges together and elevating those more diverse voices?
Well, I think, it's fairly clear that there is value in having women's and men's knowledges both working together, because I think that's the way that, we can make agriculture more sustainable, more resilient, more innovative, the way that we can actually, get practice change adopted. If everyone who's on the farm, on those family farms, is kind of involved and on board with everything. So, yeah, I just think it is a way forward. It's a way of sort of breaking the status quo, I guess, and starting to look at agriculture from a few different perspectives.
Thanks, Linda. That's actually very interesting, because in the social benchmarking study, we're finding now that it's a really positive thing, and it can have really positive outcomes in terms of better diversity of knowledge around managing data and understanding different parts of the farm when you've got a decision-making team. So that's coming out really clearly in the study as well. Look, I'd like to throw it out to the audience now if anyone has any questions for our panel, or any comments or anything you'd like to share about what's happening in your regions. Or you're all just hungry. Question over here. Oh, yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the panel session. I've really enjoyed this. Just wondering whether you've seen any differences in sector, so grazing, livestock, cropping, dairy.
Yeah, probably in our region there's sort of the women are more involved in the livestock part of the farm, if it's a mixed farm. Yeah,
Yeah, we've definitely seen in Tasmania where there's a lot more mixed farming. That's why you've got 25% women. So that was quite clear.
Yeah, ours is the same. If I think to a couple of specific examples, the women that are very involved in the farm business are taking a very heavy role in the livestock side of it. So whether they're considered more nurturing, I don't know if that's a driver for it, but they definitely are taking leading roles in the livestock part of the business.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. If I commented on the dairy industry, I would have thought, just from my work across sectors, that there would be more women involved in the dairy industry. But a lot of their roles is the bookkeeping, the raising of the calves, and probably in the shed a little bit, but mostly that bookkeeping and raising of the calves. So the jobs are really segregated. Yeah.
So they're multitasking, just
They are
normally do.
multitasking,
Yeah.
yes. And it's that nurturing. I think that women are really good at raising calves. They've got the patience and that nurturing. And I think they go for the jobs that they're good at. Mm.
Thank you. And there's a question over here as well before.
Is that on? Thanks so much. A great discussion, as you're saying. And I find that going around farm activities now, you see a lot more couples and things go into these events, and it's fantastic. And I usually find that the ladies speak up really well at them, and they're really, really great. But I completely understand the things about the barriers about, you know, just toilets and times of day when it's often school drop-off and things like that. But I wanted to maybe play devil's advocate slightly on this, and I'm just wondering whether the idea of keep pushing ladies-only events is sending the wrong message to men, that it is okay to have segregated events for these sorts of things, and we don't need to include you because you all lot have your own ladies' events and things like that. Should we, as somebody who much prefers discussions with the women at the barbecue than the footy separately, should we try to be integrating this a lot more? And I know we need to build confidence perhaps with some of the women, and maybe that's the process, but yeah, are we doing too much of that sort of thing?
Can I just say, so my husband, when I'm organising a women's event, he goes, "Oh, God, you women, you're not special, you know." But we integrate. So every event is open, except there are events that in certain workshops that, look, we don't say men can't come at all, but it's generally known that it's going to be sort of a focused around, you know, so many women are coming in, and the guys actually don't really want to go. So it's a process to build confidence. So we get now more women coming to just normal workshops anyway. And that's just over the years of gaining that confidence. So we definitely don't want to, you know, have this segregation, but I just think it's a way forward.
It comes back to that comment earlier about understanding your audience and their needs and where they would like to fit as they take their journey through learning. So we even find with young farmers that they don't like being thrown straight up in the mix with the more experienced farmers because they feel like their questions will be stupid. Or that they don't get to air their questions because they're overpowered by some stronger figures in the group. So it's about taking them on a journey to build their initial skills and then inviting them to be a part of the bigger conversation as well.
I think just to add one thing on that as well, certainly I think I know, you know, child caring responsibilities do often fall to the woman, but also a lot of the time they don't, you know, and I know on the Eyre Peninsula, Naomi Schultz was talking about engagement events that had childcare attached to them. And that brings all of the younger farmers as well. So there's a lot of younger families, you know, if the children have got somewhere to go, the whole family can come. And that can drastically increase that engagement as well. Question from Richard. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
I was curious to ask, what is your perception about the role of non-farm employment, so female non-farm employment? Does it strengthen or weaken the role of having an own perspective? Because even if you have a different employment, a different professional background, you might still have valuable perspectives on the situation on farm. I mean, you're the second adult on the farm, right? So you might have further ideas, but if you're perceived as being working in education or in accounting, does that help or does that undermine?
Well, I can sort of talk about that from the research that I did and what people told me. And I guess it's sort of got two strands to it because it is quite often the woman who's working off farm, and that's seen to be valuable, particularly in hard times, in bringing in additional income. But a lot of the women told me that also means that they are then pretty detached from what's happening on the farm. So they felt that their role in terms of decision making, being involved in day-to-day management on the farm, was decreased by them working off farm. So yeah.
But then again, Linda, sometimes because they're bringing in they're having financial, support that can aid them to make decisions because that finance is a big thing.
So it gives them more of a seat at the table, that supplementary income, because it is a massive, massive phenomenon. I think at least. I think it's 20% to a quarter of farms in the study have that supplementary income is pretty crucial. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm not quite sure how the question is, but we're hearing a lot about how to make more opportunities for women's knowledge to be heard. I'm also hearing that most of the time it's not heard because there isn't time for it to be heard because they're busy and they've got so many loads. on them already, and the men have potentially got those opportunities to have their knowledge shared. I'm just wondering, are there opportunities for men to take some of that load from the women in exchange for that knowledge to be shared? So rather than making more opportunities for women, which they don't have time to do, are there opportunities for men to substitute in cases? Were there any examples where it worked and where the women are doing the books, so they've got the knowledge, and then the men took the morning off to discuss the books and make the decision together? I'm just wondering, were there outliers where it was working because there was some arrangement to make that time?
So we've got a few farming businesses in our area where the time is made through these farms having a board structure, and the board actually involves the whole farm unit. It's not exclusive to the males within the business. It'll bring in their external support networks as well, so accountants, advisors, whatever. But that is a mechanism that some of our farming businesses are using to make sure that everyone's opinions and voices are heard, and we're seeing some really strong outcomes from that. And I think that's what's driven these women taking on pretty significant roles of responsibility within the farm business, is because they're invited to the table on making those decisions.
On a smaller level, we've got farmers that they'll meet with the whole family once a week and discuss and do exactly what you're saying, Alice. So that does bring everybody's voice to the table, and that's really important.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity for greater sort of shared decision-making, then perhaps that takes the pressure off the male as being the sole decision-maker as well, in terms of sort of mental health and improved communication as well.
Yeah, and it certainly has a direct link to improved succession planning as well. When you bring the family together, and in another study I'm doing at the moment, that's come up as a key thing, having the family structures and those regular meetings. But it does have those direct links with having someone ready and willing to take over the family farm in the future as well. I think everyone's pretty keen for lunch, so I think we've got one more question. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, hi. This will probably bring it back to the issue of soil management for you. One thing that we've noticed in the Holbrook region is that a lot of the women are actually taking on the role of environmental stewardship within the farm business. And so they will be the ones doing the carbon accounts, doing the tree lines, looking at best practice for pastures, etc. And I'm wondering whether this is a phenomenon that other regions are noticing, and whether we can actually enhance this more to encourage not only greater involvement of women and empowering of women within that business. And I think we're at the time of where environmental markets and carbon, etc., are helping with this, but whether that's actually encouraging women to be more proactive and more central to the business management decision making, and also achieve goals around better soil management.
Can I just say to that, Alison, that would have probably been non-core business. So that's where women could have taken that role, because the core business was done by the guys, right? So now that is becoming less non-core and more core business. So yes, that will certainly create a great place for women.
Yeah, Linda, did you want to comment on that briefly? I know we're running out of time, and I saw we've got one more question over there.
Look, I guess just briefly, I guess that is really bringing the value of women's knowledges more into focus, which is what needs to happen, I guess. Yeah.
Great, and there was one more question. Have we got time for one more, or we?
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. I just wanted to. I've seen that the conversation has been centered around, women. Depending on how you see it, there are more complexities even now around genders now, but now women in this situation, in this case, around how they support men. Are we beginning to? Are there any questions, wonder as to how women themselves can actually begin to own their home farms, and then the conversation could change to how men can actually support women in their home farms? And the reason why I've asked this question is because if you learn from some other civilizations, you will discover that a lot of what we're talking about today really has to do with social engineering. And are there lessons learned from other civilizations? For example, in Africa, ancient civilization in Africa, women had a huge role to play on the farmlands. They planted the crops, they harvested the crops, they had huge economic empowerment as a result of their hands-on participation in the farm. So are there lessons learned from other civilizations, and how can policy initiatives from the government in this part of the world, especially in Western societies, be used to actually empower women to now begin to not just see accounting and some other roles, fancy office roles, but to now want to go to the regional areas and farm and make some good money? Thank you.
Can I just quickly say to that, I think this is an organic process in terms of whose land ownership, because now women, like the farmers that I know, they're talking about the splitting up properties amongst the male and female. So that's kind of an organic process as well. It's not as bad as it used to be.
And I guess just one other thing that I found some participants talked about too, when women got involved, there were multifunctional farming paradigms on their farms where men were doing some things, but women were doing other value-adding things as well. So there's those sort of opportunities as well when women's knowledge is valued.
And they're brought together. That's great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Oh, Kelly, did you want to say this?
I was just going to say, I think we come from a position where values were heavily rooted in tradition, and so some of the things that we've seen coming through for a long period of time and hard to break is from a traditional perspective, that the father would pass the land on to the son. Heaven forbid they were in a position where they only had daughters, because that makes it a lot harder. But now we're seeing values are more based in progression, like what are we going to do going forward? How do we want our family to be involved? So I think a lot of that's starting to shift, and we'll see it continue to do so.
Yeah, based on what's coming out of the social benchmarking, it would be great to see that encouragement of a bit bigger team in the decision-making on farms. So as we finish up, I just want to thank all the panellists for bringing your expertise to this discussion. I'd like to also thank the audience for some really good questions, and I have a challenge for you. So anyone who's working in research or extension or in any part of agriculture, which is, I'd say, just about all of you here, what is one thing that you might be able to do to bring more voices into the discussions and into your conversations? So I invite you to carry that conversation on over lunch.